Before the first man drew breath, before even time learned to count its own heartbeat, the earth was alive in ways our minds can barely comprehend. This was the Age of Reptiles, a living cathedral of scales, storms, and silence. The continents were not yet divided. They were vast and wild, breathing like sleeping gods. Mountains had no names. Oceans had no borders. The air shimmered with the scent of rain that had never touched human skin. And in that ancient silence, something watched. It began as a whisper in the winds, a light that moved where no fire burned, a shape that glided across the stars. The creatures of the earth, the titans of tooth and claw, lifted their heads to the heavens, sensing what was to come. They were not the first witnesses of creation, only the next. For something older still was descending, something that did not belong. From the heart of the cosmos came the Watchers, the Skyborn, beings made not of flesh, but of radiance and purpose. They were sent to observe the Earth's unfolding story, to marvel at life's ascent. But awe turned quickly to fascination, and fascination to desire. Among the storm clouds and meteors, they crossed the veil between worlds. Their descent tore the sky open. The night glowed white as the mountains trembled. Those who saw it, if any living creature could truly see such light, would later remember it as the birth of gods. The Watchers stood tall as the forests themselves, their eyes burning like suns reflected on water. They spoke a language that bent the air, and their words seeded thoughts in the minds of the beasts below. In that moment, the earth changed. The world had life, but not consciousness. Now, for the first time, thought took root. A lone wanderer, neither fully man nor spirit, walks across the endless plains of this newborn earth. His name is lost to time, but his memory endures in whispers, in bones, in forgotten dreams. He was there when the Watchers came, when the first fire burned blue, and when the first promise was broken. He tells his tale to no one and everyone. His voice is the echo that speaks across millennia. Before the dawn of man, he says, the earth was a garden of titans, and in that garden something fell from the sky. Not a star, but a will. He remembers the first of the Watchers landing upon the peaks, their feet melting stone, their touch awakening rivers. Some say they came to bless the world, others whisper they came to claim it. Whatever their intent, their presence altered the very rhythm of creation. The reptiles, rulers of this primordial paradise, felt the shift. Behemoths the size of valleys turned their gaze to the lights above. A great terror spread, for even they sensed divinity had walked into their realm. Lightning danced between heavens and earth, as if the planet itself recoiled in awe. And the wanderer, he watched as the sky opened again. But this time, not only light descended. Alongside the watchers came their creations, spheres of crystal and flame that burrowed into the ground, pulsing like hearts. From them, the watchers drew strange energies, shaping matter with gestures and sound. They were builders of worlds, yet their touch made the earth tremble, as if the soil resisted being rewritten. At the heart of a valley now lost to time, the first meeting took place, not of gods and men, but of heaven and earth. The watchers studied the crawling creatures, the beasts of the swamps, the flying lords of the air. They saw beauty in their brutality, and from that beauty came envy. One among them, Azarel, the fire-bearer, looked upon the earth not as a garden to be tended, but as a throne to be taken. His fascination grew into rebellion. "Why should we only watch?" he whispered to his kin. "Why should we not create as the Creator did?" The others hesitated, but curiosity burns brighter than obedience. They began to experiment, altering the very essence of the living. Some creatures became stronger, others more aware. In the shadows of this ancient laboratory of life, new forms emerged, hybrids of instinct and intention. And somewhere, in the distant ages that would follow, the first thought of man was conceived. The wanderer would later call it the first dream, a moment when the earth realized it could imagine itself, when awareness ignited in the hearts of the small and fragile. But for every light born, a shadow followed. The watcher's actions rippled through the fabric of the world. Volcanoes roared, storms gathered, and strange energies warped the skies. The reptiles, once lords of all, began to vanish, not by war, but by transformation. The age of tooth and claw gave way to an age of intellect and will. The world was preparing for something it could not yet name, the arrival of the Nephilim. As night falls over this forgotten earth, the wanderer climbs a ridge of black stone. Above him, the sky burns with unnatural auroras. He looks upon the vastness, the forests, the storms, the sea of scales below, and feels both wonder and dread. "They came from the stars," he whispers, "and the earth let them in." Somewhere far beyond the horizon, the first human cries echo, weak, fleeting, but destined to outlive the titans. The watchers turn their gaze toward those fragile beings and smile, not knowing that their curiosity will soon become their downfall. The age before memory is ending. The age of forbidden creation is about to begin. The sky was no longer silent. For days, or what passed for days in that world of endless storms, the heavens trembled as rivers of fire crossed the firmament. The Watchers had returned, and this time they did not come as mere observers. They descended in legions. Across the high plateaus, the jungles, and the roaring seas, light fell like rain. Beings of flame and thought, tall as trees, faces veiled in radiant mist, touched the earth once more. Their descent shook mountains and split the clouds. The oceans rose to meet them, and even the beasts of the Age of Reptiles bowed their crowned heads in instinctive awe. What had begun as curiosity had become conquest. Among them walked Azrael, the fire-bearer, the first to defy the silence of heaven. He was not alone. Sariel, Uriel, Ramiel, and Shamsael, names that would echo in clay tablets and forgotten psalms, followed him through the breach between realms. Each carried the memory of divine command, but their eyes burned with rebellion. They were the architects of life, stepping onto the clay of their own design. When their feet touched the ground, the earth changed again. The forests twisted toward the light. The rivers hissed with steam, and the sky shimmered in unnatural hues. The Watchers built sanctuaries of light and crystal, places where sound could move matter, where thought could shape stone. The Wanderer watched from afar, hidden among the shadows of towering ferns and smoking rock. His kind, the early ones, neither beast nor man, felt the call of these new gods. They were drawn to the warmth, to the voices that promised knowledge. The Watchers offered fire, metal, and language, gifts that no creature had ever known. "You will no longer crawl," said Azrael. "You will stand and name the world." And so they did. The first words spoken by mortal tongues were learned not from the earth, but from the stars. But knowledge carries the scent of danger. With every secret given, the Watchers grew more entangled in the world of flesh. They taught the early tribes to weave, to build, to count the moons and stars. They taught them to mine metals from the mountains and to shape tools sharper than bone. Yet it was not the gift of craft that would doom them. It was the gift of desire. Among the mortals there were women who bore the light of dawn in their eyes, creatures fragile yet radiant, their hearts beating with the rhythm of the earth itself. The Watchers looked upon them, and their purpose trembled. For the first time, the Skyborn felt longing. The stories that would later become scripture spoke only in riddles. The sons of heaven looked upon the daughters of men and saw that they were fair. But behind those words was a truth far more terrible. Azrael was the first to cross that line. He took one of the daughters of Earth, a woman whose name has long been swallowed by time, and in that forbidden union, something new stirred within creation.
a being not of heaven nor of earth, a child of both worlds, the first of the Nephilim. The wanderer saw it unfold like a dream. The sky shone red as the union took place. The earth groaned, the trees wept sap like blood, and even the beasts fled in silence. From the union of fire and clay came a child whose cry cracked stone and frightened the wind. He grew quickly, his body immense, his eyes reflecting galaxies. When he walked, the ground bent beneath him. When he spoke, the air itself seemed to listen. And so the era of giants began. But not all of the watchers rejoiced. Many trembled, for they had broken the sacred order. Uriel, keeper of the law, warned them, "You have bound eternity to dust. You have sown fire in mortal flesh. The Creator will not remain silent." Azrael only smiled. "Then let him speak," he answered, "for we have already spoken life into his silence." The defiance spread. The watchers continued to descend, hundreds, perhaps thousands, each taking mortal form, each bearing forbidden children. Across the world, the valleys echoed with the roars of beings who were neither god nor beast. They built great cities of stone and light, carved into mountains, rising higher than any bird could fly. Their temples shimmered like stars fallen to earth. The age of reptiles was ending. The age of giants was dawning. But paradise was never meant to last. The earth began to rebel. Storms grew unending. The seas swallowed coastlines, and the volcanoes awake as if in fury. The balance between heaven and earth trembled under the weight of this new race. The Nephilim devoured everything, beasts, forests, even one another. Their strength was boundless, but their hunger was greater. The watchers watched their children with pride and fear. Azrael stood atop his crystal citadel and looked to the heavens. There, beyond the clouds, thunder began to form, not of storm, but of judgment. He could feel it, the gaze of the Creator upon the world they had remade. The wanderer, still hidden among the ruins of ancient forests, recorded their deeds in symbols scratched upon obsidian. He knew what was coming. He could feel the tension of the cosmos, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for the reckoning. And then, one night, the stars themselves began to vanish. One by one, the lights faded, swallowed by a blackness that grew like a wound in the sky. The watchers stood in silence, knowing what it meant. Azrael lifted his hands toward the void and cried out, "You cannot unmake what has been made." But the only answer was thunder. And in that thunder, the whisper of doom. The Nephilim roared in confusion, unaware that they were the reason the stars were falling. The earth shook, and even the oceans seemed to grieve. The descent of the watchers was complete, and with it, so began the long shadow of their sin.
The earth had changed its heartbeat. Where jungles once breathed with reptilian thunder, now rose pillars of stone, shaped by hands too vast to be mortal. The watchers had passed their gifts and their curse to the Nephilim. The Age of Reptiles was fading, its titans replaced by creatures far more terrible, the children of fire and stone. They were born in silence and grew in storms. Their skin shimmered with a faint light, like embers hidden beneath flesh. Their eyes mirrored the stars, and their voices carried the echo of thunder. They walked where mountains trembled and seas parted. The Nephilim, giants of two worlds. The first of them, Amun-Ra, stood taller than any creature that had ever lived. His breath was fire, his heart an echo of the cosmos. He could uproot trees with a gesture and command beasts with his gaze. Yet within his immense body dwelled confusion, a soul that belonged to neither heaven nor earth. He would sit for hours upon the cliffs, staring into the sky, whispering, "Why does the light above feel so cold?" His mother, a mortal woman of forgotten name, had long since turned to dust. His father, one of the fallen watchers, had fled from the wrath gathering in the heavens. Amun-Ra was alone, a living monument to forbidden love. And though he was born from rebellion, he knew only longing. Around him, others of his kind took form. Iram, whose voice could bend stone. Namira, whose tears turned to crystal. And Elion, who could summon flame from air. Together, they shaped the world as they pleased, turning rivers, mountains, and even the sky itself into their canvas. But creation, once begun in wonder, soon turned to domination. The Nephilim built cities the size of continents. Their walls were fused with molten glass. Their towers gleamed with the light of suns trapped within crystal veins. The early humans, frail, astonished, trembling, worshipped them as gods. They brought offerings of fruit and blood, songs and bones, believing that the giants could command life and death. And perhaps they could. The Wanderer, now aged beyond reckoning, the last of his tribe, moved among their temples in secret, recording their language with carved obsidian blades. He had seen the world before the giants, and he saw what they were becoming. They were not meant to rule, he whispered. They were meant to remember. Yet memory is a fragile thing, and power, when unchecked, becomes hunger. Among the Nephilim, a sickness grew, not of the body, but of the spirit. They began to see the world not as creation, but as possession. Their hands reached for the skies, demanding to reclaim the heavens that had rejected their fathers. Amun-Ra declared, "We are not children of gods. We are gods unfinished." The others cheered, shaking the mountains with their voices. In their pride, they forged weapons from the bones of fallen leviathans and metals pulled from the heart of volcanoes. They hunted the great reptiles, the last of the earth's old kings, not for survival, but for glory. In a single generation, they erased millions of years of balance. The roars of the dinosaurs became echoes. The Earth's forests, once thick and eternal, burned for the first time under the flame of a thinking will.
But among the Nephilim, there were a few who remembered. Namira, the crystal-blooded one, would wander through the charred ruins and weep. She could feel the pain of the earth beneath her feet, a whisper of the living soil crying out against its creators. She sought her father, a watcher who had once taught her the music of the stars. But he was gone, swallowed by shame and light. In her solitude, she met the Wanderer. He did not bow before her as others did. He simply looked up at her and said, "You have the eyes of one who mourns what she has not yet lost." Namira asked him what he meant, and he told her, "Even gods die when they forget they were once born." For the first time, a Nephilim wept for the fate of the world. As centuries passed, the children of fire and stone grew more divided. Some sought peace, teaching humans the art of healing and the secrets of the stars. Others, consumed by their divine hunger, waged wars that shook the planet. Oceans boiled, mountains split, and rivers turned red. The Watchers, who had hidden themselves in the upper mists, looked upon their offspring in horror. Their defiance had spawned chaos. They whispered among themselves, "We gave them knowledge, not wisdom." And from the farthest edge of heaven came a decree. The Creator's silence was breaking. One night, beneath a sky lit by burning comets, the Wanderer found Amun-Ra upon the ruins of his golden citadel. The giant knelt among broken statues, his own likeness shattered by his hand. "The heavens no longer speak to us," Amun-Ra said. "Have we been forsaken?" The Wanderer replied softly, "You have not been forsaken. You have been heard." The giant turned, confusion in his vast eyes. "Then why do I feel only silence?" "Because," said the Wanderer, "even the divine must face the echo of their choices." Amun-Ra looked to the sky and saw it. A vast storm gathering, greater than any before. The air itself tasted of salt and sorrow. He did not know its name, but the earth did. The ground beneath him whispered it like a dirge. The flood. The Nephilim would not understand its purpose, not yet. They would fight, rage, and rise higher than ever before. But the tide was coming for them all, giants, beasts, and mortals alike. And as the Wanderer turned away, his voice faded into the wind. Fire and stone cannot outlast the sea.
The heavens split open like a wound. The stars that had watched in silence now burned with fury, and the air itself seemed to scream. The Watchers, once proud, once radiant, felt the tremor of judgment racing through the fabric of creation. They had defied their Maker. They had mixed the light of heaven with the dust of earth. And now the balance demanded blood. It began with a sound, not thunder, but something deeper. A vibration that reached the bones of the world. The oceans rose, mountains cracked, the sky turned to fire. From the highest vaults of the firmament came legions of light, unseen forces that moved with purpose. their descent like falling suns. The war of the Skyborn had begun. The Watchers stood upon their crystal citadels, staring into the maelstrom of their own undoing. They had no armies, only their children, the Nephilim, towering giants who had never known fear. They roared in defiance, their voices rolling like avalanches across the world. Amun-Ra stood at the front of them all, his body gleaming with molten gold, his eyes twin stars of rebellion. Behind him, Elyon the Flame-Bearer raised a sword forged from the heart of a comet. And Namira, sorrow in her gaze, whispered to the wind, calling the remnants of the old beasts, the winged and the scaled, to rise once more. For the first time, the earth itself joined the war of heaven. The skies were rivers of fire. Bolts of divine light fell upon the mountains, turning them to glass. The Watchers fought with power beyond comprehension. Their voices shattered valleys. Their steps carved new canyons. But for every flash of heaven's wrath, the Nephilim answered with the fury of earth. When Amun-Ra struck the ground, continents shifted. When Elyon roared, storms swallowed cities. And Namira wept, her tears hardening into crystals that fell as rain across the world, each drop singing of grief. The Wanderer, the last witness of the first world, watched from the edge of a burning cliff. The night around him was no longer dark. It pulsed with crimson and white, a living apocalypse. He saw Watchers falling, their light extinguished as they struck the earth. He saw giants rise against the heavens, their weapons blazing like stars in motion. And in that chaos, he understood. This was not merely war. It was creation tearing itself apart. The Watchers' voices, once melodic, now screamed across the wind. You were meant to guide them, not become them. You have stolen the breath of the divine. Return what was taken, or be erased. But the giants did not yield. Amun-Ra lifted his hand toward the heavens, grasping lightning as if it were a living thing. We did not steal your fire, he cried. We became it. And he hurled the storm back into the sky. The blast tore through the clouds, striking the unseen veil that separated realms. The result was cataclysm. Whole mountains imploded. The seas turned black with ash. The sky itself cracked, a fissure between the mortal and the divine. The war of the Skyborn raged for years, or perhaps centuries. Time lost meaning. The sun dimmed, the moon bled. And in the ruins of their once glorious world, both gods and giants began to fall. One by one, the Nephilim succumbed. Some burned away into light. Others sank into the molten earth, becoming the sleeping mountains we still see today. Amun-Ra, pierced by a weapon of celestial fire, collapsed into the ocean, his final breath creating waves that circled the globe. Elyon, his flames extinguished, turned to obsidian stone. Namira vanished into the depths, her song becoming the hum that still echoes beneath mountains. Only silence remained, a silence so heavy it felt eternal. The Watchers themselves were shattered.
Many were dragged back into the heavens in chains of light. Others chose to fall, their brilliance fading into the dust of stars. And those who survived wandered the earth like exiles, their wings darkened, their memories broken. The wanderer, kneeling amidst the ashes of the fallen, lifted his face to the silent sky. The fire of heaven has scorched its own reflection, he whispered, and now the earth must bear its scars. From that moment, the war was over, but peace did not come. The heavens had spoken, yet the world below still trembled. The Creator's judgment had not yet arrived, only its echo. In the centuries that followed, the world healed, but not completely. The seas calmed, forests grew again over bones the size of mountains. The last of the Nephilim faded into legend, their names buried beneath the sands of time. Yet beneath the surface something stirred, a pulse slow and deep. The earth remembered, and with that memory came the first whispers of a coming flood. The watchers who remained, broken and repentant, tried to warn their children, the scattered tribes of men. But mankind, inheriting both the light of heaven and the hunger of the Nephilim, had already begun to build, to conquer, to forget. One final scene remained etched in the wanderer's memory. He stood atop a cliff where the sea met the ruins of a giant's temple. The air was thick with the scent of salt and ash. Above him, the sky still glowed faintly, a scar of the war that had ended the first world. He whispered into the wind, "Heaven has fallen, earth has burned, but water remembers." And somewhere beyond the horizon, a low rumble answered, not thunder, but the gathering voice of the deep. The flood was coming, and this time it would not spare the mighty.
The rain began as a whisper. Then it became a roar that swallowed the world. For 40 days the heavens wept as if mourning their own creation. The rivers rose like serpents of liquid glass, devouring forests, mountains, and the bones of fallen empires. The earth trembled beneath the weight of its punishment, and the Age of Giants began to drown in silence. In the valley of the fallen watchers, the Nephilim gathered in terror. They had known battle, they had known fire, but they had never known fear like this. The sky no longer burned with lightning, it bled. The stars disappeared behind a curtain of endless rain. Among them was Arakel, the last of the Skyborn to walk among mortals. His wings, once bright as silver, were now soaked and heavy, dragging in the mud. Around him stood the half-blood children, massive beings of muscle and sorrow, clutching stone relics as if they could shield them from divine wrath. "Father," one of them cried, "why does heaven destroy us?" Arakel could not answer, for in his heart he knew the flood was not meant to destroy the earth. It was meant to erase memory. Every echo of the forbidden union between gods and mortals was to be washed away.
Every trace of the old knowledge, the light that had burned too bright for humankind, was to be buried beneath the waters of renewal. And yet, even as the flood consumed the land, some resisted. In the high places, tribes of men sought refuge in mountains and caves. They carved the stories of the giants upon their walls, crude shapes of immense beings battling the storm, their eyes bright with grief. Those paintings, destined to survive for millennia, were messages to the future. We once lived among gods. Arakel looked to the horizon. The cities of the Nephilim, vast fortresses of obsidian and basalt, sank beneath the rising sea. Temples crumbled. Great beasts, bred by ancient hands, vanished beneath the black waters. The song of the world fell into a deep and aching stillness. But the flood did not kill all. Some of the Skyborn, stripped of their light, descended deeper, beneath the earth, into caverns untouched by sun or moon. They carried with them shards of their old power and whispers of vengeance. Others, seeking redemption, turned their wings toward the storm and vanished into the clouds, never to be seen again. And among the mortals, a few of the Nephilim survived, smaller than their fathers, yet marked by the same fire. They would become myths, the long men, the watchers, the titans hidden in memory. When the rain finally ceased, the world was reborn into quiet. The oceans had redrawn the face of the earth. Mountains had fallen, islands had risen. From the silence of the flood emerged a fragile humanity, humbled, trembling, yet alive. They looked to the empty sky and whispered prayers to a God they could not see. But deep below, in the hollows of stone, a different kind of prayer was uttered, one not of forgiveness, but of remembrance. Arakel's voice echoed in the dark. The flood may bury our names, but it cannot drown the truth. One day, when the stars realign, the children of fire and stone will awaken again. The waters shimmered in the dying light. Somewhere beneath, the bones of the giants lay dreaming.
When the waters receded, the world felt hollow, as if the sky itself had forgotten how to breathe. The mountains stood like broken teeth, their peaks glistening with the last tears of the storm. The air was heavy with the scent of rebirth and rot, and beneath the mud lay the bones of an age that had dared to reach too close to heaven. The giants were gone, or so it was believed. But beneath the new world, something stirred, a pulse deep within the veins of the earth. In the drowned valleys, light glowed faintly under layers of stone and silt. It was not fire nor sun, but something older, a remnant of what the Watchers had once carried within them, the light of knowing. It was the same brilliance that had taught men to carve, to count, to dream. And though the flood had been sent to bury it, The light refused to die. In a cavern hidden beneath the shattered plains, a child was born. He was no longer of the sky, nor entirely of the earth, but something in between. His name was Aram, and his eyes shimmered faintly in the dark, reflecting the glow of the buried light around him. His mother, one of the last mortal women who had sheltered with the Nephilim before the deluge, whispered stories of gods and angels as she held him close. She spoke of a time when the stars sang and giants walked beside men. "Never forget," she said, "that we were made of more than flesh. The heavens once lived in us." Aram grew among ruins and silence. He wandered the caves of his birth, tracing the glowing veins of mineral light that ran through the walls like blood through the body of the earth. He began to see visions, shapes of wings, towers that reached the clouds, a world before the flood. Each vision came with a pain in his chest, as if his soul remembered a song his body had never heard. Above, humanity was rising again. Small tribes built shelters of wood and clay, carving their stories into stone to remember what they could not understand. But the buried light began to call them too. Hunters saw strange fires beneath the ground, shimmering through cracks in the earth. Some called it the soul of the world. Others called it the sin of the ancients. And in the forgotten places where no wind dared enter, the survivors of the Watchers still lingered, pale, formless, stripped of glory. They spoke in whispers, unseen, waiting for one who could bear their memory. Aram's blood sang when they came. A voice from the dark spoke his name like thunder through the bones of the cave. "You carry what was lost. You are the bridge between silence and song." He trembled, feeling both terror and awe. The Watchers revealed themselves not as gods, but as shadows of their former radiance, their faces fractured, their wings broken, their eyes dim. Yet within them the same buried light glowed faintly, the last spark of heaven that refused extinction. "Teach them," they said. "When the stars return, they must remember what we were and what we became." Aram fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of it. He saw visions of the world reborn, tribes learning fire anew, carving symbols of suns and wings, unknowingly recreating the language of the fallen. He saw the future, pyramids that would rise to mimic the mountains of the old gods, temples built to honor the ones who fell. The buried light was not only beneath the earth, it was inside humanity now. Every spark of creation, every act of wonder or defiance was a fragment of that ancient flame. The gods had drowned, but their light survived, scattered into the hearts of mortals. As Aram looked towards the dawn breaking through the shattered horizon, he understood. The flood had not been the end. It had been the seed. The age of the giants was over,
But the age of memory had begun, and deep within the earth the buried light pulsed once more, waiting for those who would dare to seek it again.
The earth had healed, but the heavens had not forgotten. 1,000 seasons had passed since the flood, and yet the silence of the sky still felt heavy, a wound that never closed. Humanity had begun again, scattered and small. They built fires in the dark, raised stones to mark their dead, and whispered prayers to names long lost. But within them something ancient stirred, a memory not born of blood, but of light. It began as dreams. Men and women saw visions of towers made of fire, of beings with burning eyes and wings vast as storms. They woke with tears on their faces and no words to describe the ache in their hearts. Children were born who gazed too long at the stars, as if recognizing them. The old called them starborn. The young called them cursed. They did not know that what they felt was the echo of wings. Iram, now older, his hair silver as the ash of old fires, lived in the high desert among stones carved with forgotten signs. He listened to the wind whisper through the cliffs, and in that voice he heard them still, the Watchers. Their language had faded from the world, but not from his blood. Each gust of air, each tremor of the earth spoke a word older than time: remember. He taught the tribes what he could, how to shape the stars into stories, how to listen to the ground, how to see the divine within the mundane. But the more they remembered, the more restless they became. They built towers again, reaching skyward. They forged idols of stone and gold, giving faces to what they did not understand. And somewhere beyond the clouds, the old light began to move. The Watchers, once bound in silence, felt their names stirring in the minds of mortals. The echo of wings was not only memory, it was awakening. Each act of creation, each spark of discovery, drew their essence closer to the surface of the world. But the heavens, still scarred from their rebellion, trembled. A warning rippled through the fabric of existence. The light that falls may rise again, and when it does, the cycle begins anew. Iram knew what it meant. He had seen this pattern: birth, defiance, destruction, rebirth. The same story told in stone and blood. He wondered if the gods had ever meant to end it, or if creation itself depended on the eternal echo of those wings. One night, beneath a sky painted in fire and dust, Iram climbed the tallest peak. The air thinned, the stars pulsed above him like the eyes of ancient souls. And then he heard it, faint, distant, but unmistakable. A sound, not wind, not thunder, but the soft, haunting rustle of feathers across the firmament.
He looked up, and for an instant he saw them, the shadows of wings stretching across the constellations, vast and luminous, brushing the edge of the world. Tears filled his eyes. The Watchers had returned, not in body, but in echo. Their essence now lived within humankind. Every artist, every dreamer, every seeker who dared to reach for more. The divine rebellion had not been erased. It had been reborn. The stars flickered brighter, and in that light, Iram whispered, "We were never meant to forget. The gods fell, but their echo is what keeps us rising." He closed his eyes, and in the stillness he felt them, countless wings unfolding in the dark, carrying the weight of creation once more.
The world had forgotten the sound of wings. Yet, beneath its silence, their memory still lived, not in stone, not in flame, but in the fragile breath of humankind. Iram's bones had long turned to dust. The towers he built were buried beneath the sands of time, and yet his words, his remembrance, echoed in the hearts of those who came after. Every prayer whispered to the stars, every symbol carved upon temple walls, every yearning gaze toward the heavens was born from that ancient light that refused to die. The flood had cleansed the world, but it had failed to erase its memory. In the cradle of a new dawn, tribes gathered upon the plains to honor what they could not name. They raised fires to the east, where the sun returned each morning, believing it to be the eye of the Skyborn, the last watcher who never slept. They spoke of a time when the gods had walked among men, when mountains were young and rivers sang of glory. They did not know the full truth, they only felt its echo. And that was enough. Far beneath those same plains, the earth still dreamed. In caverns untouched by air, where the flood had once hidden its secrets, a dim glow remained. It was faint now, flickering like a dying ember, but alive. The buried light, the first fire, the memory of heaven itself. Every 1,000 years it pulsed once, as if the heart of the world still remembered the rhythm of angelic wings. And then came the new ones, those who would build pyramids to touch the sky. Those who would carve gods from limestone and give them the faces of men. Those who would write of angels, of giants, of floods, never knowing that the myths they worshipped were the memories of their own beginning. The stories traveled through ages, carried by wind, sung by nomads, painted on walls. Each retelling reshaped the truth, but the essence endured. That once heaven had fallen to earth, and in doing so had made humanity divine. In the realm beyond stars,
The watchers, now formless, eternal, looked down upon the world they had once walked. They saw their light scattered among billions of souls, each flickering with the same hunger that had once led them to fall. And one voice, old as the cosmos itself, whispered, "We are not gone. We are remembered." Another voice answered, "And remembrance is eternity." They no longer longed to return, for they understood now that their fall had given birth to something greater. Through humanity, the universe continued its song. Through curiosity, rebellion, love, and loss, the echo of wings still moved through time. Somewhere, beneath the quiet heavens, a child looked up at the night. The stars shimmered like living eyes, and for a moment the wind brushed his face with the softest touch, like the passing of a feather. He smiled, unaware of the story written in his blood, unaware that within him glowed the last memory of heaven. The echo of wings drifted across the world once more, not as thunder, but as a whisper. We fell so that you may rise.